Welcome to Buffalo After Dark, everybody. It's your Wednesday night uncensored, unfiltered, and unafraid sports show. You still up? This episode of Buffalo After Dark starts now. Welcome to Buffalo After Dark, everybody. It is Wednesday night, November 16th. We're 1 week away from Thanksgiving, which means, of course, we'll have our yearly Thanksgiving special coming up. But anyways, it's nice to be back this week after we had last week off. Bob, how's your night going?
I've been okay. I've just had a long day at work and just kind of just easing down to the weekend because tomorrow is Thursday. So I'm excited to get back after a week. And yeah, so on top of all that, I'm getting ready for my trip in 2 weeks to go to Foxborough with my wife to see the Bills-Patriots game on Thursday night.
Sweet. Yeah, and things are going pretty good here. I just had a couple of work things I had to deal with the last couple of weeks, but other than that, things are going pretty good. And other than that, we're pretty much ready for that nasty lake storm that's going to be coming through here, which I will talk about that a little bit later in our second half of the show. But as usual, if you guys want to join us, 929-205-6099 will get us on the air, or you can scan the QR code and join us on Facebook. So first thing I want to talk about tonight, and this is one of the big things that we've been seeing over the last week and a half, but unfortunately, the Sabres have regressed a little bit. And with what's happening right now, 6-game losing streak, and currently they're losing 1-0 against Ottawa at the towards the end of the first.
Have they learned anything from the last 11 seasons?
I don't know. I mean, it's tough to see exactly what's been happening lately because of the fact that, I mean, this roster is a little bit different. I mean, they are trying to compete. I will say that Boston game where we ended up losing 3-1, I mean, we were tied at 1 all the way through the beginning of the third, and it's just we couldn't hold on in the third period. And I think there's a lot of different things going on. Power play is a little bit suspect right now. Matthias Samuelsson being gone, that's really hurt a lot of things. And it just seems like these guys are just not finishing plays the same way that they were. I don't know if Samuelsson being gone totally made that much of a change, but it just seems like they're regressing a little bit. Now, I will give them some credit on this. They were fighting in that Bruins game, and they were actually trying to still get the 2 goals back, which, okay, that's all well and good. When they played Vancouver last night, it seemed like they tried to turn it on towards the end of the third, but yet they couldn't keep their foot on the gas in the beginning of the game. It just seems like they're doing some things well, but it almost seems like they're trying to either do too much or, on the other hand, one of the things we've seen is line combinations getting tinkered with all the time. And it's like, Bernardo, same thing. I like you as a coach, but don't do what Bielema did, and don't do what we saw with Housley, and don't keep changing the lines every 3 games.
Yeah, I mean, the Vancouver game yesterday was very suspect to me because I checked in every once in a blue moon. I mean, I didn't really get much access to watch the game I got to watch it on my phone and all that. And the moments I got to see it, I did see some times of, defensive ability, which I felt like was very suspect. Again, the Bushkin getting injured earlier this year, Samuelsson getting injured earlier this year, it just did not help. I mean, the defense is very suspect, and it feels like to me they're relying way too much on Tage Thompson, and he's going to be a beast in this league. There's no question about that. Alex Tuch is starting to come in. Jeff Skinner is starting to come in. I like those 3 guys alone, but everybody else around them cannot put anything in the net. It's not helping their case as far as saying, well, who's going to be here long term? And again, this is a very young team. So these guys still have to get to know each other a little better. They have to still learn the system. And again, it's more like they're still a young team, and it's not like we expecting them to win the cup this year. I mean, I don't know anybody who thinks that to begin with. I mean, unless you bet plus 35,000 fucking whatever dollars.
Yeah, something on DraftKings or whatever, taking some weird prop bet.
Like betting on the Browns to win the Super Bowl. But
oh God.
So the whole thing with the Sabres lately has just been very suspect. I am not a fan of the tandem of Eric Conry and Craig Anderson. I am not a fan of it at all, ever since Samuelsson went down.
Yeah, me either. And it seems like Comrie is just not playing up to the level that he originally showed at the beginning of the season. Now, Anderson's doing everything he can to try and hold down the crease, and he's had some excellent saves over the last like 5, 6 games. There's no question about that. Anderson's playing, I think, as good as he can. Comrie, I think, is a little bit suspect right now. But to your point, especially with what you mentioned, outside of Thompson, outside of Skinner, and even Olofsson to a point, it just seems like there's really not a whole ton of consistency there. Yeah, Akposo's like trying to light up everybody too. But just to give you an idea what's happening in tonight's game, Austin Watson is the one who got the lone goal for Ottawa, and that was at 9:45 of the first from Sanderson and Kelly. But at least I will say this, the shots on goal are fairly close. I mean, Senators have 14, Sabres have 11, and they're going into the power play to start the second period. So
yeah. Another thing too I've noticed is Eric Comrie has a lot of problems with rebound control. You ever notice that?
yeah, I have seen that, and especially taking a look back when they had that nice road trip out west, Comrie was suspect in some of those games,
I agree.
and it's like he's got to do a much better job
You know
controlling
what's
that. But at the same time, he's got to have help around the net too, and he's not getting that.
No, they're leaving him out to dry. It reminds me of the earlier years when Dan Bosman was first the coach and when Robin Leonard was the goalie. It felt like the defense left him out to dry. And this is when they had Rasmus Ristolainen and Zach Bogosian on that team. So it felt like to me that the defense just completely derailed. I don't know what the system is with the defensive core. I don't understand it. I mean, you have Owen Power and Rasmus Dahlin. Those two guys I'm not worried about because they're both playing
Yeah,
out of
me
their
either.
but it's everybody else around them that's the problem. And the most ironic thing about all this is Eric Comrie's rebound control problem reminds me so fucking much of when Evgeny Nabokov played for the Islanders in his first 2 years when he was traded from San Jose, where he was being a bitch and didn't want to play for the Islanders because of how bad they were. And then when he finally came to an acceptance, he's like, all right, fuck it, I'm the goalie. And I remember Nabby when he played for the Islanders, had serious rebound control in his first 2 years. And a little over time, he got a bit better at it, but he was also like 35 years old at the time. But Nabby had some serious rebound controls and he couldn't smother the puck. And I feel like this is an issue that's happening right now with Eric Comrie. And keep in mind, Comrie's never been a starter. So it's very challenging for him to not be able to ever get a chance in the NHL level to ever be a starter. And then on top of all that, you're having problems with rebound control. I don't know if it's coaching. I don't know if it's the system. I don't know what it is. But the Sabres look like a fucking joke to the point where people have already basically said, all right, we're allergic to the month of November. Let's just tank for Connor Bedard. And then I said to myself, if they tank for Connor Bedard, you're basically committing the same shit they did 7 years ago for Jack Eichel.
Yeah, and look where that got us. He's not even here anymore. So I have to say, I mean, a lot of what you said, I think it's a little bit of all of the above, in terms of that. I mean, now I wouldn't write off the entire month of November. I mean, yeah, we've played like crap all month, but I mean, I'd rather slump now versus later in the season when it actually matters. That's kind of how I look at it in a sense. And I will give the team this. I mean, there are some good flashes of effort that are coming up. There are, and I'm not going to say that they're completely just packing it in, because I don't think we've really gotten to that point. Actually, one of the things I can say is that the effort that this roster is giving, I think, is still better than a lot of what we saw last season. But it's those little things that they really have to get into and really have to get through their head, where a lot of times when you're in hockey, it all comes down to possession. And it comes down to controlling the zone. And if you can't control the puck possession, 9 times out of 10, you're going to lose every game.
Absolutely.
I mean, you have to do that. Now, and I will say this, compared to seasons past, they're actually hitting players now. They're playing more physical. Those are good things. That all kind of goes into part of what you do with possession. And doing those little things and not overthinking a play is really where I think gets us in well, if we don't overthink a play, I think it'll help us, because I think right now, the way that Granato has everything set up, he lets everybody on the ice be creative as possible, which is good. We see some good offensive flashes, but at the same time, you still have to play within a system, and there's ways that you can do that, but you can't forget what the overall system is. And I think you've got a fairly straightforward, simple system compared to what we saw with Housley, who was just trying to basically hamstring every single thing known to mankind, or Bielsa, who tried to throw way too much into it.
Yeah, don't even get me started with Phil Housley. That guy was a fucking bum as a coach, and we all got duped.
Yeah, exactly. Although I can say at least we both played a part in helping him get fired, so that's good. going back to the Swedish media incident.
That is one of my defined moments in my life.
Yeah. That's one of the greatest things we ever did on this show.
Yeah, I'll never forget that.
Yeah, like literally a week after we had that sign posted for a while.
Yeah, and we got ripped in the I got ripped up by the Buffalo News and all that bullshit. I personally, and you know me, I don't care.
And besides, it was Harrington. Harrington sucks. We all know that.
You know what I mean? Like, who's gonna remember me, honestly? Unless I tell them that story, then they're gonna be like, "Oh,
you're that guy."
That guy.
Right. Right. But you know what? It was a good thing because Housley was out of here, and it led to where we are now, which is, well, minus of course the fact we had to deal with Ralph Kruger for a little bit, but.
Oh, God, I can't. I don't know who was worse, Housley or Kruger.
I don't even want to remember either one of them. Honestly, they both suck.
How many coaches have the Sabres have had in the last decade that have actually panned out for them? The only one that I personally think in my top two that actually had a system but didn't really work out in the time frame were Ted Nolan and Lindy Ruff. Mm-hmm. Those were two coaches, in my opinion, that actually had a system. And Lindy Ruff, and I've said this in the past, is that I always liked Lindy Ruff as a coach, but at the time he got fired, it was time to move on. The players were not the same. They were rebuilding, and I don't think he wanted to be there. And I didn't blame the guy personally. But looking at what he's doing now, just briefly a touch on it, is of how well he's doing with the Devils. That he's doing so phenomenal in New Jersey. There's a lot of frenzy about them and the Islanders right now. And being an Islander fan, I'm very happy where they're at. I didn't expect them to be this competitive with the Devils per se, but at the same time, I like New Jersey as well. I don't hate them. I like the Devils. I want them to succeed, but I'm happy for Lindy because I think his system and his style of coaching, I think, has gotten the best out of the Devils. And I wish that was the case for the Sabres. I think if Lindy Ruff was the coach here, I think it would make a huge difference. But I was thinking that to myself, I'm like, if they fire Granato tomorrow, would they bring back Lindy Ruff? And the answer is obviously no, unless he was employed. But
it's not good. Yeah, it wouldn't happen. But let's jump in and talk about that. So, and of course, we're partway through our first segment. If you want to jump on 929-205-6099, we'll get you on the air with us. Right now, we do have the live chat up and running on Facebook. So, of course, if you want to join us there, you're more than welcome to. We'll take your questions and comments. But seriously, if you want to call in, let's have a chat tonight. So we haven't had any calls in a while, so let's do it. But but let's talk about it. So the Devils have had early success. The Islanders have had early success. What's different this year? Because Lindy Ruff already had the Devils last year, and they were a total dumpster fire. And now they actually have a good system and they're playing well.
This is what I don't understand about the fucking Islanders. And you know me, being an Islander fan and all that. And you heard me talk about it last spring or this past spring. I lost my fucking mind when the Islanders when they fired Barry Trotz. I was not happy at all.
I remember that. And I thought it was a stupid move at the time.
At that time, that was honestly and even now, I still think that was the stupidest thing the Islanders ever did. But looking back at it now, they're having a tremendous amount of success, with the offensive game. And Matt Barzal is killing it in the assistant chart, but he doesn't have any goals, which is really ironic because the guy just got paid like $8 or $9 million, which is really ironic. But I think the guys that have really stepped up was Brock Nelson and Anders Lee. And there's a very interesting story that went around. Did you hear about this on Barstool Sports or on Spit and Chicklets?
No, I haven't really seen too much about it yet, but I know that there was a story going around. So go ahead and tell us.
Okay, so there's an interesting story going around about Johnny Gaudreau. And Johnny Gaudreau, I don't remember who he was talking to, but Spit and Chicklets brought this up on their show the other day. And they mentioned that Johnny Gaudreau was being booed at UBS Arena when the Islanders played Columbus the other night. And every time Johnny Gaudreau touched the puck, he got booed. And he told somebody and said, "Why am I being booed? I never even spoke to the Islanders to begin with." And then, conflictedly enough, Brian Boucher last summer basically said that Johnny Gaudreau had conversations with the Islanders, the Flyers, and the Devils about signing a contract. And it was like it conflicted everything Johnny Gaudreau said because they were very heavily involved. And then he came out and said, "Well, I never talked to the Islanders. I don't know why they're booing me."
Oh, Jesus.
And then it's so odd because it's like you're booing, I don't know. It's a really, really strange story. I mean, I think it's kind of funny because Islander fans, I don't know if they're still bitter because he didn't take their contract. And there's actual Islander fans that are defending it, but like, yeah, whatever. They got Matt Barzal. They'll survive without you. I mean, if they could survive without John Tavares, they could definitely survive without Johnny Gaudreau. But Johnny Gaudreau would have been a huge help with the Islanders down here. He really would have. But they're doing better. And what's really ironic is he took the money in Columbus, and his team is in like the bottom 10 in the NHL.
Oh boy.
Where the fuck is Columbus? I mean, obviously on the map they're in Ohio, but I'm talking about like standing wise. Where's Columbus? All right,
let's take a
holy
look.
shit! You want to know where they are? Columbus is 5-9-1 with only 11 points in 15 games, 31st in the NHL. So they're the worst team in the
God.
East. Yeah. Imagine that. You have Patrick Laine and Johnny Gaudreau, and you trade away Oliver Bjorkstrand because you couldn't afford Johnny Gaudreau. So that's basically what this is about. Like, what the actual hell is going on in Columbus is beyond me. And I love how Johnny Gaudreau goes over to Columbus. Is like, I want to win here. I want to be close to home with the family. Like, dude, you're from New Jersey. You had a chance to go home to the Devils or play for the Flyers. He was a Flyers fan growing up. And he goes to freaking Columbus, which is 8 hours from the area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And basically, look what happened. They're totally in like the worst shape you can think of in the league so far.
Why would you go to Columbus? There's like nothing going for them.
Yeah, exactly. It makes no sense. It really makes no sense.
No, it really doesn't. I don't understand that. I mean, again, I would have loved the Islanders to get Johnny Gaudreau, but because of him with this money approach, it's just flabbergasting that he actually took the money from the Jackets because they got desperate. And they said, we need people to come to play for Columbus. And sure enough, he goes to Columbus. And he's been a bright spot, but it's like, is it really worth enough? I mean, maybe in like 2 years they'll be good, but right now they are just utter ass. I don't understand the Columbus Blue Jackets one bit.
Well, it could actually be worse. There is one other team that's actually worse than Columbus right now.
Who, the Sabres?
No, Anaheim.
Well, yeah.
5-10-1.
Yeah, well, Anaheim is Anaheim. Arizona. How the fuck did the Sabres lose to the Canucks and the Coyotes?
Your guess is as good as mine. I mean, think about it this way. So the Sabres right now are 7-9-0, and we still actually have a +2 goal differential. Of course, that massive goal differential we had in our favor totally like went bye-bye after we lost all those games. And it could be worse because Anaheim has a -25 goal differential right now, which is the absolute worst in the league. But think about it this way. Arizona, 6-8-1, and they're basically a -14 goal differential, and they're in 27.
That is so embarrassing.
And Vancouver, 28th place, 5-9-3 with a -12 goal differential.
I don't understand that at all. Like, again, when you have that kind of statistics and you just go out and get someone like Johnny Gaudreau and you have no production out of that, there's a serious problem.
Right. But contrast it with the top 3 teams. I mean, Boston, of course, is number 1 in the entire league right now at 14-2, and they have a +30 differential. So, I mean, they're scoring like they're like scoring like every single chance they get.
They're scoring approximately 3 or 4 goals per game almost.
Yeah. Yeah. The Devils, 10-game winning streak, 13-3 right now with a +21 differential. And then the round at the top, well, actually, I'll do the top 5. Number 3 is Vegas, 13-4 with a +19 differential, and they've lost 2 straight. The Islanders, they've won 2 straight, 11-6, and they're a +14 differential. And then Carolina is number 5 at 10-5-1, and they're at a +7 differential. And then, of course, after that, you have the Maple Leafs.
Nothing makes any difference. Nothing makes any sense anymore.
Yeah. Well, how about this? Seattle's an 11.
Seattle, my God.
8-5-3. and they won their last game in overtime.
Yep.
And they have a +7 differential right now.
Yeah, and then in place 12 and 13 are the Tampa Bay Lightning and the New York Rangers. You know what? The Rangers can suck a dick because at this point, I cannot stand the fucking Rangers, Tom. With every core of my being, I absolutely hate them with a passion. I will never root for them. I will never cheer for them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just really interesting to see what's going on with it. But, we'll just kind of keep track of what's happening with all of that stuff going on. But, kudos to Jersey, kudos to the Islanders. I mean, they're playing well this season, and, hopefully they keep that going. But to round out the first half hour, we've got two other things we want to talk about. And one of the big things that came up, Erik Karlsson might be on the move.
It's funny because Erik Karlsson's name has been brought up a lot. Elliot Friedman, Darren Dreger, and all the big boys in the Insider Club all basically said that the San Jose Sharks, Mike Greer, the GM of the San Jose Sharks, wants to move Erik Karlsson's contract for more cap, which I don't blame the guy. And Erik Karlsson's playing probably one of the best years of his career thus far, which he's having a great year thus far. He's one, if not in the statistics, he's like in the top 3 in his category, but he's trying to basically say, I want to move Erik Karlsson. But the problem is he's making $11.5 million and he's in his mid-30s. And that's a problem. So it's almost baffling to think that Erik Karlsson, as talented as he is, and he's been injury prone for a few years, it's impossible to move his contract. And the thing with that is the Ottawa Senators want to bring him back. And I don't blame them. But the problem is if the Ottawa Senators want to bring back Erik Karlsson, they might have to move either Alex DeBrincat or Artem Hub. They have to move one of the two. They can't afford both. I think it would be very risky for Ottawa to do that. So, I mean, they just got DeBrincat over the summer, and they want to give him a contract extension. But I feel like the Senators are just getting desperate, and they want to win something. I don't know why or how they were able to, convince Claude Giroux to come back to Ottawa. I don't understand that. I mean, I know he's a future Hall of Famer, and you're playing with, Brady Tkachuk and all that, and they have a good group of talented players coming up, but they're so fucking banged up. Like, I can't even compensate about how they're even in this category, and yet they want to bring back Erik Karlsson to the goddamn Senators. I don't understand that.
Yeah, it makes no sense. And Ottawa is one of the worst teams in the league right now. So, I mean, I don't think Karlsson would really want to come back anyways, but it just makes no sense, especially with the way that he ended up leaving there. I mean, it's like, why would you want to bring him back? I mean, I get like the stuff that he can do, but still, it's like, it makes no sense. And if I'm Karlsson, I'm not taking that move.
No. And again, the biggest issue is his contract, because Ottawa and San Jose did have some dialogue, but they can't do it because of the money that Karlsson holds. And because the Sharks signed him to that massive extension a few years ago, because that's why he wanted to be traded. He wanted to leave Ottawa because of the direction, and Eugene Melnyk wasn't going to pay him at the time when he was alive to pay him what he wanted. And he said, you know what? Screw you, Eugene. I'm going to go someplace else. And he gets traded to San Jose. And in the first year he was in San Jose, they were really damn good. They went to the conference finals, but they lost to the Blues. And since then, they just went downhill. And the Sharks got older and father time caught up, and it just has not been the same. And Erik Karlsson is the only bright spot right now that's like on the elite status. And this guy's like 33 years old.
Yeah, he's literally their best player right now. So, time will tell what happens on that. But if I'm Karlsson, I don't take that move, if at all possible. But one other thing also did come up in the NHL this week, and then we'll round out the first half hour with this, but the NHL might bring the Global Series to Australia. And this is something where the NHL has been doing this for a while. And apparently over the next week or two, Elliot Friedman from Sportsnet was reporting that there is the possibility that the NHL may try to bring a couple of games over to Australia, which that's something that hasn't really been done before. Now, they've done different versions of the Global Series going all the way back to 1938 when the Red Wings and the Canadiens played games in the UK. But other than that, I mean, they've played in Europe quite a bit. They've played in Asia a couple times. They've basically been in 15 different countries. And according to what Sportsnet has out here, the 2022 Global Series basically saw Nashville and San Jose go to Switzerland, Germany, and the Czech Republic. And then on November 4th and 5th, the Blue Jackets and the Avalanche ended up playing some games in Finland. So Australia, I mean, it's a good sports market. I mean, they do have a lot of different sports down there. Expand it to another country. Who knows? Could get some additional fans.
I mean, they're clearly trying to get popularity in other countries. I mean, the NFL is doing it too in other countries, like to the point where we'll talk about that in the second half of the show.
Mhm.
But the one place I've heard that the NHL wants to do games in Australia is Melbourne, which is, I think, the second capital or whatever. I think it is the capital of Australia.
It's
or it might have been
one of the largest. Yeah, it's one of the larger cities. I know Sydney, I think, is the largest, if I remember correctly.
Sydney is probably the largest, if not the most famous city in the continent of Australia. And Australia is very small for a continent, but still, if you can bring an NHL game to Australia, I think what make the most sense is if you put the San Jose Sharks and the Vegas Golden Knights there. That I think would make the most sense. Because it's like, why would you drag an NHL team from the East Coast? Let's say, like, for an instance, like the Penguins. You would move the Penguins to Australia with another team out west. I think that would add a lot more of exploitation among fans. Yeah. I think it would benefit and profit them. But again, the only player that's currently in the NHL right now that's from Australia is Nate Walker. And I think he's on the St. Louis Blues.
Right. Or they could do something, for example, have Seattle play LA or Seattle play the Golden Knights. Any of those combinations, could be a good fit.
It could very well be. I really don't know what their plan is, but this is not happening until like 2024 or 2025, because I think because of Australia, they actually had to push the World Cup of Hockey, which honestly, who gives a shit? I mean, they've been talking about this for a long time and they keep pushing it back. But the World Cup of Hockey is supposed to be pushed back to 2025. And it's like, what's the point? Are you advertising Australia as like your next like big like global series game or something like that?
Yeah. It'll be fun to see what they decide to do. I mean, if they can get a couple of West Coast teams down there, get a good rivalry going for a few games, or have a few teams down there, that'd be perfect. So, time will tell. But with that being said, it's kind of funny how fast a half hour flies. So we're done with our hockey segment. Coming up in the second half of the show, we're going to talk about the Buffalo Bills. Also, we're going to talk about some NFL news, and we have a little UFC today. So stay with us. We'll be back in 20.
Welcome to Buffalo After Dark, everybody. It's your Wednesday night uncensored, unfiltered, and unafraid sports show. You still up? This episode of Buffalo After Dark starts now.
Welcome back to Buffalo After Dark, everybody. We're in the second half of the show. Of course, he's Bob. I'm Tom. Nice to have you guys here. If you want to chat with us, you're more welcome to 929-205-6099. We'll get you on the air with us. And of course, we saw what happened this past Sunday. I was literally wanting to break stuff after we went into that overtime, but the Bills decided to blow a 3-score lead, and we threw a pick in the end zone. And the Bills decided to lose 33-30 to the Vikings, which are actually a good team.
Where do I begin with that game? I don't even know where to begin. First of all, the Bills played a great first half. They did. They looked like
they dominated that first half.
Absolutely. But I have so many questions to ask. And my main question to Ken Dorsey is, why did you abandon the run game in the second half?
That's one of the biggest points I was going to bring up. Singletary was running the ball. He had a couple scores. He was lighting it up. And this was, without question, his best game of the season. He did not have any other good games besides this one. And even James Cook was getting some good runs. Why would you abandon that? Because here's the thing. Minnesota's run defense is not that good. Just like our run defense sucks. And yet we're running it down their throat. You're playing ground and pound football, and yet you decide to air it out. And the thing is, the Vikings actually have a good pass defense. Why would you switch it up?
I don't understand that. And yet everybody before the season was going to say Ken Dorsey was going to be an NFL head coach. Now I question his ass. I'm telling you right now, I'm calling it. If they lose to the Browns on Sunday there's going to be a concern problem going on in that locker room.
Mhm.
That's number one. And number two, I guarantee you, Ken Dorsey will get fired on Monday by Sean McDermott and hold him accountable for his bullshit actions and bring in Frank Reich. I would not be surprised if they did that.
That would be interesting. And we'll actually talk more about that in another segment here coming up. But I mean, first and foremost, this is 3 straight games where we've now run into this issue. And you look back at what happened against Minnesota. You look back what happened the week before. These are games that we should be winning.
Yes.
And that hasn't happened. We should have won against the Jets. That didn't happen.
No.
We should have won against the Vikings. That didn't happen. We dominated the first halves in both. We took our foot off the gas, let it go in the second half. And it comes down to the same thing. Both teams decided to start running the ball against us. Wore out our defense. We still don't have all our starters back. And the thing is, we decided to go try to play hero ball, which we shouldn't even be doing in the first place. You're managing the first half perfectly fine. What is so different in the second half that caused you to just abandon the run game altogether?
You know, I mean, and again, I'm glad you brought that up because you know what's funny? I was going to call you after the game, but I felt like that if I called you, you would have like, Bobby, not now. I'm pissed off. I don't want to talk about it. I already have people butting in my head about that who are Jets fans, and they're up our ass. But there is something I want to read to you in a little bit about good teams that have come over adversity. But back to my point. Number one, you take your foot off the gas. That's the number one rule in football is you don't take your foot off the gas. The Falcons did that. They lost the Super Bowl. They almost did it 3 weeks ago against the Packers. Yep. Yeah, granted, the first time it happened against Green Bay, we said, okay, whatever, cool. They won the games. But let's fix that going to the Jet game. Second week, which is the game I went to with my wife, we went to the Jet game. And it felt like a lot like the Jacksonville game last year, where they were expected to win that game and they don't contribute to any of their, plays into their weaknesses or exploit them. You know what I mean? Like they don't even do that. And my theory was the Jets, they're this lowly graded team. We're having a good year, and I give them credit. They're a very good defensive team. Their offense is just in shambles, but their defense is really damn good.
Sully's done a nice job with that.
Sauce Gardner's a great player, and I hate to say that. And then, no, but the problem with the Bills game is I felt like they got very cocky against the Jets. That's what I felt. And then they kind of just took their foot off the gas. The only moment in that Jet game that actually made me feel like, okay, this is going to be like any other game was the very first drive. That was the only moment. And outside of that, they abandoned the run game. Josh Allen was playing hero ball because I think Ken Dorsey has learned nothing from the Bills system since he's been there, which was like, 2019 when he became the QB coach?
Yeah.
Okay, so somewhere like that. So Dorsey absolutely knows the Bills offense. He knows because he worked with Allen. He knows his strengths and weaknesses. But what I don't understand is you work with Allen because you could see that he's trying. And I understand. And I love Josh Allen to death. I would not trade him for anything. I would never do that. And he's loved and gifted in Buffalo. There are going to be adversities. Nobody said that this was going to be an easy season. Everybody wants the Bills dead, specifically with the expectations and all the signings and etc. They have a very good team overall. There's no denying that. But there are moments where I think, like the Jet game, for example, I felt that was the game where the Bills came down to earth a little bit and were forced to be humbled. That's how I felt about that game. The third game against the Vikings, those two games, Jets and Vikings, those were inexcusable. No, I don't want to hear any excuses from that game. Some people will say, oh, they had injuries. They had this. Allen's playing hero ball. He's regressing. No, Allen, first of all, is not regressing. He's having a slump. Every good quarterback does this.
Yes, he ran into that last year, too. He had a couple bad games. And, I mean, it happens every single year with every single quarterback. I mean, look at Tom Brady with Tampa. I mean, he had a horrible, 4-game stretch recently. And he's still not playing good. Or even look at Dallas. I mean, they ended up blowing a lead and they lost to Green Bay this past week. So, I mean, things happen. But one of the things, going back to your point, I mean, and sure, Allen's got the elbow injury. He played through that like there was no problem. So I don't even want to talk about that because as far as I'm concerned, he threw it perfectly fine with that. So I think the
Absolutely.
elbow is a non-issue.
I actually want to read something to you because we're talking about adversity.
Mhm.
Is somebody on the Bills Mafia page in Florida wrote this? Some guy named Matt. I'm not going to say his last name out of personal reasoning, but this guy named Matt says that loss sucked. I was angry yesterday because this was written at the time of Monday, and I still am today. I've had time to think about it over, and I want to put it in perspective. We're still 6-3 with plenty of football to play. Here are some recent teams that seems to have similar issues. The 2021 Rams were 7-4 through week 12 after losing 3 straight games. The 2020 Tampa Bay Buccaneers were 7-5 through the 7-5 through week 12 after losing 3 out of 4 games. The 2019 Kansas City Chiefs were 6-4 through 10 weeks after losing 4 out of 6 games. The 2018 New England Patriots were 7-3 through week 10. All those were good teams, and maybe all those teams won the Super Bowl to have an overcome adversity. This is the Bills' opportunity to show that what they're made of, and these teams were in all similar situations as in recent seasons, and their seasons turned out pretty damn great.
It makes a good point. And even Von Miller mentioned something similar on Pat McAfee's show this past Thursday, which actually, if you guys follow our page for any length of time, you'll know that this season, we've actually been featuring the Pat McAfee show every day during the week, Monday through Friday. We have the link right on our page. And Von Miller is always on Thursday afternoons now. He's usually on in either the 2 o'clock or the 3 o'clock hour. But Von Miller mentioned the same thing. This is a good test of adversity for us. And this is going to show what we're made of. And he said 6-3 is not a bad spot. He said he actually likes the spot we're in right now because basically he knows what they need to do the rest of the way. And I will say, Miller had some really good pressures on the QB. I mean, he nailed Kirk Cousins at least once. We had some good pressures on him. We had some good sacks on him, but it was a lot of it, I think, comes down to the offensive side of the ball. And what we need to do, I mean, Singletary, use him. He can run. He showed that he could run against the Vikings defense. And then, of course, you have Nyheim Hines, who had some pretty decent flashes. Utilize him. He's great, especially with the catch and run. I mean, utilize him. You could use him as a slot receiver, like when we had Cole Beasley here.
Yeah, and I think Brandon Beane will say something to Ken Dorsey and Sean McDermott. Because you ever notice when the Bills lose those bad games? And again, it's football. It happens. And I said to my wife, I'm not angry the Bills lost this game. I'm angry how the second half was performed. I didn't care about the loss by that point because I knew the Bills were going to bounce back. But it's how they performed and executed. That was what pissed me off. Right. I'm not worried about the Vikings. The Vikings are a good team. They earned the win. They earned their rights.
Yeah, they're having a good season. O'Connell really has changed the ship around for them.
Absolutely. But the point is McDermott always just stands there like a fucking idiot on camera every game the day after the game, and people were butterating him in the press conferences. Yeah. And people were trying to hold him accountable. And I think he understands that. But I feel like sometimes with how he responds to some questions, it feels like to me he deflects some of the blame and blames it on the players and blames it on Allen and blames it on the defense and the coaching. It's never himself. You ever notice that?
I have seen it from time to time. Now, I will say, I remember when we had a former QB, and a lot of people really liked this QB that we used to have. Doug Flutie always deflected. Any single time that when he was our QB and the Bills lost, it was always his team and never him. But when the team won, it was always because of Flutie. It's not as bad as that, which I will say Flutie was an arrogant prick, and I don't care what anyone else says about that. That's my opinion on him. And I don't like him as a QB anyways. But I mean, McDermott, I think to an extent, he does hold himself accountable, but not as accountable as what he really truly could.
Like Josh Allen. He holds himself accountable for everything.
Oh, yeah. Josh Allen said he flat out sucked the last 2 games. And he said it straight out.
Yeah, that's what makes a good leader is good leaders hold themselves accountable and they learn from it.
Exactly.
That's what good leaders do.
Yeah, and he's the undisputed leader of that locker room. It's his team. I mean, we all know that.
Absolutely.
But I get it. He takes the team on his shoulders, and he takes it personally when the team loses. And that's what you want in a good leader. Now, let's take a look back at some of the other stuff. I mean, even Diggs takes a lot of it on himself too. But one of the stats that they showed during the game on Fox is that, Kansas City, Mahomes is literally 81% of that offense. Josh Allen, 82% of our offense. You can't have QBs being 82% of your offense.
No. And this is what I was talking about. McDermott exploits Allen's running ability because he did mention earlier this year that Josh has gotten better with his passing than he's been using his legs as like a second thought. His arm is a priority. And I think that's something that can be corrected, but it has to be done steadily. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, and now I will say, Allen had some really good running plays in that game. I mean, he actually broke one for like 26 yards, and then I think he had one for over 30 at one point. But I mean, you're not going to have that longevity if you keep forcing him to run that way. I mean, he's got the best of both worlds. He can run like Lamar Jackson, but he's got an arm like Brett Favre. I mean, you've got the best of both worlds there. Yeah. And we know he can throw it. We know he can run. He is a true dual threat quarterback.
Which is a must-have in the NFL. Absolutely.
And I mean, and a lot of people will say Mike Vick was one of the first to be that, but his arm wasn't as good as when he could run. Lamar Jackson, great runner, but not a good passer, as we saw in the Ravens game earlier this season when we ended up beating him.
It was like that.
I mean,
it was the same thing.
Yeah. We contained him in the pocket, and Lamar Jackson couldn't do much out of it. So it's one of those things. It's like, Dorsey, you have running backs, utilize them, mix it up. Do like you were doing in the preseason when you were calling those games, when you were doing like a 60-40 run versus pass, or do something along the lines, maybe like a 55-45 or something like that. Keep them guessing, because if you keep mixing it up and you do that, then you're going to have people guessing what you're going to do, and other teams will be less likely to be able to contain your offense. It's that simple. I mean, right now, our reputation, we're a pass first offense.
Yeah, I mean, I actually look at the Bills as like pass first team. They don't barely ever run the ball anymore. I mean, Singletary, I think it's because Dorsey got yelled at by McDermott for not using the run game. But what really pissed me off is I felt like that there was no accountability from Dorsey the other day. He was talking to the press and he was basically saying, "Oh, we have to do better." McDermott says the same thing as far as holding players accountable. And it's not Nyheim Hines' fault. And Brandon Beane
he's only been here 2 weeks.
He's been here for 2 weeks, and people are already giving him shit. And it's like, that's not his fault. That's on McDermott and Dorsey. They're the ones that have to approve the play calling. Beane is the one that builds the team. McDermott is just the one that coaches. I've actually heard people say that the only reason McDermott is relevant is because of Allen. And the same reason Brady is relevant because of Belichick, or Belichick is irrelevant because of Brady. I don't think that's fair because of them losing, and I understand there's going to be losses. Every single time that the Bills have lost in the last few years, it's always fire the coach immediately when they're on a 2-game losing streak or 3-game losing streak. Doesn't matter what it is. Everybody and their mothers would die to have Josh Allen on their team.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, and even other fans I've seen on some other sites are saying you need to fire McDermott immediately. No, you don't fire McDermott, because he's one of the winningest coaches. He is the winningest coach we've ever had on this team. I mean, he's won more games than Marv Levy. What does that tell you?
Speaking of Marv Levy, you ever read that quote that he told his men before every game or every time they came up with loss?
Yep.
Do you remember? You know that one?
Yep, I've seen it.
Yeah, but I'll read it to those who have never heard of it. And it says from Marv Levy, "Fight on, my men." Sir Andrew said, "A little I am hurt, but not yet slain. I'll just lie down and bleed a while. Then I'll rise and fight again."
There you go. And it's a perfect example. And, same thing. I mean, Dorsey's got to start mixing it up. I mean, that's really the biggest thing that we can do to get everything righted offensively. I mean, we have to start doing that. Now, of course, we'll start getting some of our defense back. I mean, Trey White's going to come back. I mean, you'll start getting players back, which is good. And there's always the possibility we may still sign OBJ. I mean, he's going to be ready to go probably around Thanksgiving. So we can still potentially make that good late season push. And of course, defensively, I mean, Russo will come back after that injury and, things will be fine. But right now, the best thing that I could suggest for them is that, they got to start mixing it up and start getting that run game going. I mean, that's really going to be key, especially if we're going to make a long run, and stop playing the hero ball and, see where it takes us. And we'll go from there. But, that being said, let's get into some other stuff. So, of course, one of the big things that came up, we'll touch on this briefly, and then we'll go into a couple other things, the NFL. But keep an eye on the weather. We might have a massive snow game this Sunday.
Yes, and I wanted to talk about this. And supposedly there's a report, and be safe there, guys. I know you're in Buffalo, I'm in Long Island. We're in two different parts of the state. We're not getting any snow anytime soon, but you guys are. But just be safe for me, please. And make sure you have everything stockpiled ready to go. But no, supposedly there's a report coming out that said that the game on Sunday against the Cleveland Browns, and there's approximately supposed to be up to 3 to 6 feet of snow. But the question is, does it snow on Sunday fully?
I think it does.
You
And
think
right
so?
now, just with a lot of what I've seen here locally, that snow band is going to be right over Orchard Park during the game. So with what they're predicting right now, at least 3 inches an hour is what they're looking at. And that's the heavy wet snow, because the lake is not even frozen yet. It's still like 40 something degrees. So what happens in lake snow is that the bands can be very unpredictable. But a lot of times the traditional spots that get hit are from the city south. And of course, Orchard Park is south of the city. It's about 15 and 20 minutes from downtown where the stadium is. And what that means is, in the current stadium, there's no overhang to help keep snow off the seats. And that means if they're going to be getting the 3+ inches an hour, oh man, that's going to be a fun game to watch.
Yeah, and you know what? I think the last time the Bills had a full snow game was like 6 years ago against the Indianapolis Colts. And
yeah, 2017.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, Jacoby Brissett was the quarterback for the Colts in that game. Guess who's the quarterback on Sunday? Jacoby Brissett.
Yep. So
that's really ironic to me.
Yeah, it is. And at the same time, I still remember back when we had Kyle Williams, they were making snow angels in the end zone on one of the touchdown passes.
Yeah. The one thing that pisses me off about this game going in is they're not wearing the red jerseys. And I think the last time they did it against the Colts, that was very easy. That was very smart, because the Colts are a white and blue team, and they were in the snow in Buffalo playing in that game, and they barely got to see the field or anything like that. It was a very low scoring game. But Peterman at the time, throwing the Kelvin Benjamin, he was able to see it because, he was wearing a red jersey. That makes a little more sense. I don't know why they went with blue on blue this week. I don't get it. Maybe they think of something that maybe they see something differently than the fans probably do, because they get more inside information than the fans. Let's be honest. They always will.
Right. Yeah, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. As of right now, the game is going to take place. The NFL will possibly have a contingency plan in the event that there's so much snow that they can't clear it out. Like what happened with the Bills versus what was it, the Jets when they played in Detroit?
Yeah,
that alternate site.
Yeah, it was Tyrod Taylor versus Michael Vick.
Yeah.
I remember that game. And the Bills won that game too.
Yeah, they did. And I remember they had to move that game pretty quickly. So it's something where, who knows what'll happen like when it comes to that snow game, but it'll be interesting to see. And from our partner page here, Julian J. Mafia.
Welcome to the show, asshole.
Yeah, man, you already know, working this 9 to 9 shift, man. It's crazy. I'm just lucky I'm able to get here a little early.
No,
man.
I got you. Well,
I'm loving the jersey, man. I'm loving the jersey.
There you go, man. Hey, we're talking about the fact that we're going to get snowed on so much this weekend that it's going to probably make for a very interesting game.
Absolutely. I know a lot of talks are going around with the our last snow game with the Colts, and being that quarterback was Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah, we were just mentioning that.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I know he hates Buffalo.
Yeah,
every time he gets playing this so damn near.
Right. And we were thinking about it.
He would suck a dick, honestly. That's what it
Right. But yeah, think about it, man. It's like 3+ inches an hour. That's gonna make for some very interesting football. And we better have a run game.
Yeah, that's my biggest thing when it comes down to it. Everybody wants to bring up the clips from the Colts game, but to be honest, the reason why we won that game was Shady McCoy. We do not have a Shady McCoy on the team. So it's going to be tough. I do not want Josh. They're trying to drop back and run. Don't need him slipping and sliding everywhere.
Exactly.
Just the game. Just don't take too much risk. Obviously, if it's open, take it, but just take what the defense can give you. It's very interesting to see what kind of game plan the Bills come out with and how they managed to stop Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb.
Yeah, Chubb, one of the better running backs in the league. And one of the things we even covered right before he came on was the fact that we abandoned the run game against the Vikings. And it's like Singletary was having his best game all season. And we were trying to get Cook and Himes like all mixed into it. And it's like, and the thing I would tell Dorsey, I mean, okay, this is Buffalo. You know, we get snow. This is going to be a snow game. Use the run game.
Well, I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean,
I want to see Naheem has go ahead, Bobby. Yeah, it's a big I don't know. I'm not necessarily worried about this team, but I definitely got some eyebrows raised and little question marks like, what's going on, guys? I mean, we're better than this. But at the same time, we are with 3 of our losses, it's only by 8-point margin. So how upset can we really be about these losses? Are we too spoiled right now where we're supposed to blow out every single team we face? I think that's more of it. Pretty sure this team is going to get back on their feet. Josh got to get his head out his ass and start playing some smarter ball. Stop relying so much on your arm. That's why I seen when he tried to throw that last interception to Patrick Peterson.
Oh,
I felt
God.
like you lose. He relied too much on his arm talent and thought he could fit it in there instead of just dumping off to Singletary. Let him get a couple yards to keep the drive going. He had more than enough time, but Josh will learn from it.
Well, I mean, if it makes you feel better, Julian, I was telling Tom this story earlier today, and we were and some guy I found on the Bills Mafia page in Florida wrote a post about the game, and he basically said, you know, I was pissed off on Sunday, I was pissed off the day after, which was on Monday that this was written at the time. And he said, we're still 6-3 and there's plenty of football to be played. But then he said and then he wrote in the post, the previous 4 teams that won the Super Bowl from 2018 to now have all had losing records like this. The Rams, the LA Rams last year were 7-4 through 12 weeks after losing 3 straight games, and everyone thought the sky was falling. The 2020 Tampa Bay Buccaneers were 7-5 through week 12 after a 3 out of 4 games. The 2019 Chiefs were 6-4 through week 10 after losing 4 out of 6 games, and the New England Patriots in 2018 were 7-3 through week 10. So, and the bottom line is all good teams have to overcome adversity, and this is their chance to show what they're made of. And these teams were all in a similar situation in recent seasons, and their teams turned out to have a pretty good year, and they all won their Super Bowls.
Yeah, I was gonna say, even I think the year that the Eagles ended up winning the Super Bowl within like the last 10 years, even they went through a similar situation. So I mean, all teams go through that, but same thing. You got to stop the hero ball.
Yeah, absolutely. But my biggest thing is Ken Dorsey. I'm blaming Ken Dorsey. Not a bad blame, by no means necessary. You're a brand new offensive coordinator. You're going to go through a rough patch. You played a phenomenal first half of the season, being your first time being an offensive coordinator. Bravo. Now it comes down to teams are adapting. They know what you're about. They're understanding your playbook. What are you going to do, Dorsey? What are you going to do?
Right. Just
rely on Josh to save your ass? Or are you going to develop a new plan, get a different playbook, incorporate something different to give your team an edge? Yeah. I mean, that's race the top tier of coaches to the lower tier. So it all comes down to Ken Dorsey's reaction and how he's going to change around this offense. Yeah. You can't rely on Josh Allen's big arm anymore and just Gabe Davis always being open for deep balls and step out this kind of everybody up.
Right, he's going to be double and triple teamed.
Yeah, they're doubling up Diggs and they're putting their best man on Davis. Who else you got? Press everybody up, so make sure McKenzie doesn't get by anybody, and then they're gonna allow the run game. That's it. They're gonna force us to run.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah, it's all about adjustments, and he's got to learn how to make them in real time. And right now, the second half in the last 3 games has proven that he's not been able to do that effectively yet. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. But we'll go into 2 last things before we wrap up tonight. Josh McDaniels, oh my God.
Oh,
and all I can say is you lost to Jeff Saturday.
Yeah, not only that, the Raiders were unable to fire Josh McDaniels due to financial reasonings, according to Bill Belichick. And the team is, quote, cash poor, so they can't afford to fire him and then pour in for another head coach.
Well, if they fire McDaniels, you're going to be paying 3 head coaches.
Well,
Yeah.
think about it. Think about it. You gave $100 million in distinct ownership to John Gruden a few years ago.
Which
Then-
that was totally stupid.
Yeah, and they couldn't afford to pay Khalil Mack, and they traded him to the Bears, and they used up that money on Antonio Brown. That didn't work out. And then
Yeah.
then they fired John Gruden, or he stepped down, whatever. And Rich Picasso got let go because of reasonings, and then they bring in Josh McDaniels, the Bill Belichick wannabe, and he sucks as a coach. We've seen that already. I mean, he lost to the goddamn Jaguars. That's embarrassing as its own.
Right.
Yeah,
And then
we
you
know
lose to
about
somebody who's never coached.
He's just the bum of a coach, period. I mean, there's nothing more I can really determine on that, but it's just like, Jesus Christ, dude. And then on top of all that, the Raiders have no money because they built all that money on that shiny new Darth Vader Death Star looking stadium
Yeah,
they
it
have.
cost almost $2 billion. Well, it could be worse. I mean, the Rams spent $5.5 billion on SoFi.
Well,
I got to be untrue, but I do got to get started on my show. So when you guys are finished with this one, you're more than welcome to join mine. But yeah, nothing but love. Go Bills, guys.
You
Go
got it. You got it. Yep. And then for anyone who wants to check them out, go over to Mafia Talk. He usually is on actually after our shows. So feel free to check them out. But yeah, going back to the whole thing with McDaniels. Oh my God.
right. Like, I can't even
brutal.
fathom that he's an NFL coach, period. And I remember the Patriots were very stubborn about letting him go because he was going to be the quote unquote successor to Bill Belichick. And he ends up declining the Colts job and then goes to the Raiders.
Right. Have you ever noticed that every single coach from the Bill Belichick coaching tree sucks when they're a head coach?
The only one that's been decent, honestly, was Bill O'Brien. And he was the last one to really stand. And then he was
Right.
but he lasted the longest.
But yet, if you look at the Andy Reid coaching tree, Sean McDermott's part of it. He
Mhm.
actually has good coaches.
Yeah, he does. I mean, what else is there? I mean,
Right. The Bill Walsh coaching tree is a pretty good one. I mean, there's several others you could take a look back at, but
Don Shula.
yeah, he's another good one.
What else is it? I can't say Ditka because Ditka had one great year, and then everybody after that kind of just
Right.
fell off.
I mean, Shanahan's been a pretty good one.
Oh God, yeah.
I mean, there's him, Schottenheimer, I was thinking of a little bit.
You know what's funny? I never really took that in consideration with Marty Schottenheimer. I never took that in consideration.
Yeah, but I mean, Schottenheimer was a good coach for a long time. I mean, when he was with the Chiefs, and then of course he was with the Chargers for a while. So I mean, he had some good years. There's no doubt about that. And that's actually one of the coaches I really like watching quite a bit too, just with how he would call the games and everything. But yeah, the Bill Belichick coaching tree sucks. We all know that.
Yeah, like I said, the only one that really panned out was Bill O'Brien, but even then he was decent.
Yeah. But what we'll do, since we have about 3 minutes left, let's end on a good note. Your cousin, Matt Frevola, has won another fight.
Yep. My cousin, for those of you who don't know, is Matt Frevola. He is my late Aunt Maggie's first son, her firstborn son. And that's on my mom's side. And he has been in mixed martial arts for pretty much 25 years. He has a black belt. He worked in the military and all this good shit. And then he made his second debut at Madison Square Garden, and he went up against Otman Nazider in UFC 281 at the Garden. And next thing you know, he knocked out Nazider in the first round, which to him, and Matt even said it, that was one of his biggest accomplishments in his career in the UFC thus far. And I even asked him the same question, and he basically said what I just repeated to you. And he's getting better and better and better. He has a 10-3-1 record in the UFC as it's whole. So I wanted to share that. And one of his teammates is Buffalo native Billy Quarantillo.
There you go. Yeah, and Frevola is a good fighter too. I mean, he's got a good record so far, going into it. And I mean, he made quick work in that fight.
And usually when I talk to people who are big UFC guys, and I tell them that Matt Frevola is my cousin, they're like surprised. It's like, oh, is that true? Is that really? I'm like, yeah, he is my cousin on my mom's side. You know, his mother is my late aunt who died 20 years ago from breast cancer, but he's a good guy overall. And his twin brother Jimmy was a boxer a year ago on Rough and Rowdies, and he won that fight too. So my family runs really deeply with mixed martial arts, including myself. I mean, I know a thing or two, and I have my degrees and all that, but I don't give that stuff away too much because I don't feel like getting made fun of for it. But at the end of the day, I keep it as it is, and then I don't reveal any secrets about it. And I'll just put it at that. But he did have a great performance on Saturday at Madison Square Garden. So I wanted to share that. And he wants to fight Paddy Pimblett in London in March. But Paddy Pimblett has not commented on it. But I think he wants to fight him in a sense.
Be a good fight. You know, it'd be a good card to watch.
Oh, yeah. And the nickname Steamroller, which is spelled with an A instead of an ER, that's his nickname, Matt the Steamroller Frevola. That's his full-on name in the UFC. And every person he's fought either had a winning record or was undefeated, and Matt would kick the shit out of them.
Nice. We gotta get him on here one of these days.
Yeah.
Have him hang out with us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I can always ask him, though. It's not that hard for me. I mean, for everyone else, yeah, but it's not that hard. In fact, this was on the cover. Let me get my background so you guys can see this better. Sorry. Let me turn that off for a second. There we go. That's the front cover of Newsday at Long Island on Sunday, the day after the fight at MSG.
There you go.
Yeah. Great overall guy, though.
Took care of it.
I haven't spoken to him in like a year and a half, maybe 2 years, but in person, basically. But he's a great overall human being, a wonderful guy, and he's very likable. And I once compared him to Josh Allen, where he got roughed up in college, he got roughed up in high school. Everybody doubted him as a fighter because he was too skinny, too small. And he went to the military and got his degree, and he came back and went to the UFC in the Contender Series, got a contract, and is now becoming one of the uprising featherweight fighters in the NFL, in the UFC, in the or the lightweight, whatever you want to call it, in
Good
that
stuff.
class.
Yeah, good stuff, man. So yeah, congrats to Matt Frevola on winning that fight. You know, he keeps a good record going. You know, hopefully we'll see him on here at some point. You know, it'd be fun to talk with him and just, you know, go over some of his fights and different things he's done. And with that, I was actually surprised we were quiet in the chat tonight. We had like no comments.
No,
Like, come on, guys.
come on, we're bored. Give us something to work with here.
Right. You guys know we're on every Wednesday night. So anyways, but of course, with everybody here in Buffalo, stay safe this weekend. We've got that storm coming in starting tomorrow. So obviously, you know, do what you got to do, but don't do anything crazy. And of course, we'll be back here next week as we usually are. If anything comes up during the week, of course, we'll let you know. But in the meantime, you know, stay safe, take care of yourselves and each other. We'll see you.
Yep. Go Bills.
Buffalo After Dark is an Asian H Studio production and is produced in partnership with Horns and Hooves Entertainment.